In week 6, we're really going to focus on realism as a theatrical style. We introduced this concept last week. Now we're really going to dig into it and the historical development of the style known as capital R, realism. Remember, we're not going to use that word realism or realistic to mean good or believable. It's a specific type of theatrical style, artistic style really. It can be, you could have realistic painting or sculpture or anything. For our purposes, we're talking about theater, a play that attempts to create the illusion of the actual real physical world that we live in on stage. Now, this came out of a number of historical developments and, again, affected many areas of art, and it really took a strong hold on art. We are very used to it now and sometimes even expect it without realizing it, but I want us to always remember that it's just one way of doing things, not the best way, not the only way. I've said this before, but remember that theater as we know it has been going on for at least 5,000 years, and realism as a theatrical style only goes back about 200 years. So anyone who thinks that no one ever knew how to really write a good play until a couple hundred years ago really needs to do some rethinking of that idea. The style of realism arose out of a number of historical developments. You're going to read in a lot of detail about those this week, and I'm not going to go over all that right now. But one of the key factors is science and technology. The rise in Western thought, we can put it that way, of a scientific worldview, that the best way to understand the world is to scientifically observe it, analyze it, experiment with it. That's how we get to know about things. We learn about their makeup, their structure. We look at them under a microscope. We observe them in their natural conditions. All these things, that is the modern idea of the best way to get at truth. Realism is really just the same idea. Let's present the real world as it actually is. Let's understand humanity, life, how to live it, how can we become better as people, how can we improve our lots. The best way to do that, realism would say, is by examining things as they really are in the real world, not creating fantasy worlds or things that don't really exist in the real world, but looking at a world that's really photographic, you might say. In fact, the camera, the development of photography, is another factor that sort of leads to a development of realism as a style. Think about it. A photograph of something, at least ostensibly, records it exactly as it really is. So a photograph of someone records them in a way that a portrait, a drawing or oil painting of them is different. There's more artist interpretation there. Now, of course, the flaw in this kind of thinking is we all know we've seen photographs of people that don't really look like them, or a film of something that gives a misleading impression of what was really going on there. So the camera certainly doesn't just solve all our problems, and realism doesn't solve all our problems, but it is a very important movement in art, a very important movement in theater. We're going to learn about the historical developments of it this week, and then next week we'll move on to other non-realistic theatrical styles.